much for having me do this, and thank you to you all for joining me today. I just wanted to echo John's sentiments of appreciation, and I look forward to sharing some information with you today. So as you see, the topic that we're going to cover is finding the right fit for U.S. universities. So I will spend time kind of going through some information related to that topic. I will also share some information about the University of Missouri and introduce my institution to you all. So certainly if you do have questions, be sure to enter those into that chat box. Also, it might be helpful to know that I am going to provide information for kind of different levels of students in the process. So I realize our audience, we have people in different grades, different levels of study. And so for some of you, this might be a little bit of a review of information, but I hope that the information will be helpful and that I'll have some resources that might help you in your search process. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. My full name is Shannon O'Hagan, and as we've already mentioned, I do work for the University of Missouri. However, I regularly travel with different universities from throughout the U.S. as well as universities from around the world. So this is a topic I especially enjoy speaking about, to kind of share information and really help you in that process, because I know it can be one that seems a little bit overwhelming at times. And so on this page, I do have my contact information for you, as well as the main web address for my university and our WeChat QR code. I'll also provide this at the end of the presentation, so that if you do have follow-up questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me at any time. So getting started with our topic, something that I think is helpful to do is to start by thinking more big picture in the process. And something that I think is helpful to be aware of is just how big the U.S. higher education system really is. So as you see here, there's more than 4,600 degree granting institutions of higher education. And so with that, there's a lot of different options available. And so the good news for you all is that you have many different choices. Even if you've narrowed it down to the U.S. system itself, you have many choices for universities that you might want to consider. So that's the good thing, and I know that can also be the challenge at the same time, because there's so many choices that it can be a bit of an overwhelming process. Not only do we have many numbers of universities, there's also a lot of diversity within that system. So you'll find universities of many different types, everything from 2-year to 4-year. You'll have universities with specialized academic programs, comprehensive, research, liberal arts, all different types of terminology we use to help classify a university and the type of academic offerings that they have. You'll also find diversity in student population. So some universities, of course, will have have students from throughout the US, from around the world. Some student populations will be large, some will be small. Some of the student body will be more reflective of the area of that university, and others will be very diverse. The location of the university also varies. So I know in the US that many students coming from outside the US are familiar with more of the coasts. So more of the California institutions, more of the East Coast institutions, sometimes Florida, perhaps Texas. So you'll have students kind of all around the edges of the US, but there's a lot in between the coasts. There's a lot throughout the United States, lots of opportunities for students. And so again, the good thing is there's lots of options there. The challenge is there's many choices available. And adding to that system is that it's very, what we call decentralized. So instead of having one educational authority, you have many different types of universities, and those different universities have their own requirements. So kind of the scale and diversity of the higher education system is also reflected in the US admissions process. And so that's something to keep in mind, that's part of the reason why you'll find that US universities have so many different types of requirements, so many different deadlines, because each university can kind of set that for themselves instead of it being set by one central agency. And the reason I wanted to kind of paint this broad picture is because, one, again, it does present you with so many options available, but I think it's also a helpful starting point in thinking big picture to know that there's so many different types of options out there as you are kind of beginning that search process of where to begin and how to narrow it down. And in the US, not only do we have many different types of institutions available, so a large quantity of options, what you'll also find is there's a large quantity or a high quality of standard of academics in the US. You can find great institutions of all different sizes and shapes, all different locations. And that's something where I know it can be challenging to try to figure out how to find the quality institutions. And so in the US, I just like to briefly highlight on this. I won't go into all the ins and outs, but universities are what is called accredited. So there's third-party agencies who accredit the institutions. And these third-party agencies are not directly through the government, but they're kind of, like I mentioned, third-party or outside organizations that assess the academic quality of the institution and of their programs. So this is one indicator so that you know that a university is strong quality is if they have that accreditation. And sometimes you can look to see that they have specialized accreditation as well. So for example, you might have a business program with specialized accreditation, an engineering program with specialized accreditation, or even an English language program with its own accreditation. So this is just one indicator of quality to be aware of as you're looking at universities in the US. I do want to talk a little bit about rankings, because rankings tend to be something that can be a little bit of a challenge to navigate. And it's something where you may hear from university representatives like myself who really shy away from talking about rankings. It's something that we really don't like to overly focus on. And to be honest, rankings, what I find interesting about them in the years I've been doing this is that a lot of times rankings seem to be more of a big deal outside of the US than they are inside the US. And I think the reason for that is because people within the US tend to already be a little bit familiar with the system because they've grown up with it. And outside of the US, I know many people are less familiar. And so rankings seem to be something that you can use that are a little bit more objective. It's a set number that you can use to kind of compare one university against another. And so I completely understand why rankings are used as part of that process to try to differentiate among the many different options available. But the truth is that rankings are not that simple, unfortunately. They also tend to be a little bit more subjective, and some of the rankings that are used use factors that may not be as important to you as they are to the ranking organizations. So it's something to keep in mind as you're thinking about rankings, to realize that they're just one part of the overall puzzle. And so I'm not going to tell you to completely ignore them because I understand why they're used, but I will say to not overly rely on them and to really look into the rankings you're looking at to see what it is they're measuring when they're looking at different universities. And one kind of illustration of this is something I found here where it comes to candy bars in the US. So these are some popular candy bars throughout the US, and some random website did this ranking system to try to decide what's the best candy bar in the entire country. And so this is what they came up with. And so this is something where, you know, in some ways you could use the same thing to kind of figure out universities. And ultimately it's very subjective, right? Like your favorite candy bar can be very different than your friend's favorite candy bar. And so it's hard to come up with what's really, truly the best of the best when you have so many different factors involved in that process. So what we really want to focus on is finding what the right fit is for you as an individual, not what's the best fit for everyone, but what's the best fit for you. And so I really want to walk through the steps of that process of how you can begin to narrow down on those many choices out there. One of the illustrations that we sometimes use that you might have heard before is kind of finding that perfect pair of jeans, that perfect pair of pants, and how that's similar to finding your perfect university fit. You know, you want to find those pants that you feel great in, that are just the best match for you, a reflection of your personality, and that fit you just so well that you know you're going to achieve wonderful things when wearing these great pants. Or same thing with a great pair of shoes, where everything about them is related to you and is a reflection of you, and that you can be successful and you can run faster, you can do better when you have on those favorite pair of sneakers or tennis shoes. And so we use this example to kind of highlight how the university search process is similar, so that you can kind of find the university that's going to be the right fit for you to help you to be successful based on the factors that are most important to you. A place I think is helpful for getting started is to actually look to the future. And when I say this, I don't mean that you have to have your whole life figured out. That's certainly not the expectation when you are graduating from high school. However, I do think it's helpful to look even further down the road than that admission point, to look at your college or university graduation and to try to think about where you want to be at that point. And this could be career oriented. So if you know exactly what you want to do with your life and you know that you're wanting to go to graduate school and you're done, or you know you want to get a career and what career that is, great. Then you can kind of use that and work your way backward to know the steps that are going to get you there. Or you could think of it from more of an experiential standpoint, or the types of experiences you want to have during your university experience. So are you wanting to get involved on campus? Are you wanting to attend a university that has a lot of ways to get involved, a lot of opportunities for engagement through student clubs, through athletics? Are you wanting to get engaged in research? What are the types of things that you want out of your degree program? And once you can kind of envision yourself in that role, you can start working backwards to figure out the different factors that will help to get you there. And once you have those initial things in mind, it's important to have a little bit of self-reflection or self-assessment. So that's why I have this picture of the mirror here. So you really have to think for yourself, what's important to you, what's exciting to you, and then have some of those realistic conversations about your own self and your abilities and your strengths, and also your challenge areas. So it's important to know, looking at your own academic history, the things that you have done, where you've been successful, the types of courses you've taken that you particularly enjoy, kind of the type of student you are. Are you the type of student who loves to study, who likes to be competitive with your grades, or are you someone who likes an environment that's more supportive? It's also an important time to start having conversations with your parents or with your guardians about finances. And I know that this can be an awkward conversation at times, but this can help to guide your search process. So it's important to know about how much you'll be able to afford, so that when you're looking at universities and you're comparing what the cost is versus what the scholarships offerings are, that you can kind of know whether or not that fits within the window of finances for your family. I also like to point out in this part about deadlines. It's something that I tend to highlight throughout, because having an idea of the process and the timeline for that process can also be helpful in your search process. So if you're starting very early, that's wonderful. You have all the time in the world. You have all the options in the world. If you wait till the last minute, some of those deadlines might have passed, and so you have fewer options potentially available to you. So these are all things to just keep in mind as you're starting out that process and assessing your place in the process. And once you have done that assessment, I think this is where the fun part really begins, because you can explore all your options. And what's amazing for yourself, for students like you, is that you really have the whole world to consider. There's so many great opportunities out there. And so it's great that you could potentially be successful in any number of environments. And so I encourage you, as you're exploring your options, to really keep an open mind in that process. I challenge you to really think of different environments, perhaps look up places that you've never even heard of, and explore some institutions in that area. See the types of things that they offer, the type of experiences they have, and try to picture yourself there, and really stretch beyond what you already know to see what types of things might be available, might be opportunities that you might not have considered previously. And so in this phase, you're going to be doing a lot of information gathering. And this part is where I am a big person to advocate for organization. I think it's helpful to stay organized, to use a good spreadsheet or whatever format you might use. Create a comparison chart so that you can stay organized in this process. This is where, as you're getting all this information together, if you have a tool to help you keep it organized, you can really find a way to help gather the information and eventually narrow down those options. And so you'll put in those key pieces of information to compare against the different universities that you start considering. As this happens, I understand that sometimes this is where you can start to feel a little bit overwhelmed in the process because you have all this information together, and it might seem that as you start to look into one opportunity, you find another one and another, and it leads to many more doors. So again, it's exciting that there's so many options out there, but I understand that it can start to feel like there's no way to even begin to narrow it all down. And so this is where the fit factors come into play. So finding the right fit. Fit factors are the types of things that are important to you. The factors themselves are pretty common, pretty standard, but the priority that you put on them, or the specific aspects of them, are the things that are going to be unique to each person. So for example, the type of university, maybe in all of your search process, you realize that for you, you really can see yourself at more of a small liberal arts college or a big state university. And so as you're looking at different programs and opportunities, those types of universities might start to emerge as being factors that are especially important. And so that you'll use that to help narrow down the thousands of options into a smaller number. For academic match, you'll want to make sure that areas of interest to you academically are offered by the institutions you're considering. So that sounds pretty obvious, but it's not always the case, because sometimes, you might be aware of some big name school who has great academic programs available, but if you're interested in, say, engineering and they don't have engineering, that might not be the best place for you. Learning environment is another one that's important. And actually, I think this is a question that came up prior to this webinar even started. And this is one where I understand it can be a little bit challenging to figure this out before you come. But learning environment is something that is important because it can be everything to understanding whether you thrive in a more competitive environment, or if you're looking for a university that's very supportive and more team-oriented, big classes, small classes, that type of thing. And so I would say how you can kind of assess this is to look at some of those statistic type factors, some of the metrics like class size, student to faculty ratio, and even the admission process can be a reflection sometimes of the learning environment. So if it's a super competitive admission process, then it might be a slightly more competitive campus culture. That may not always be the case, but it could be some window into that type of environment. So it's also something that you can connect with the university, connect with current students there to get a better feel for what it's really like to attend classes there. Some other factors we have listed here are the university program or prestige. So this is something where certainly rankings kind of fall in this category, but it's not just about that. It could be what a university is well known for. So at my university, for example, we're very well known for journalism. And so if you are familiar with journalism programs, you'll likely hear of my university, and that's something where you might then start down that path to explore what it is that makes it unique to study that program. Departmental or institutional collaborations are something else that some students don't always think about, but could be important depending on what interests you. And an example for this could be, let's say that you're interested, I'll stay with the journalism example. Let's say that you're interested in sports journalism. Well, if that's something that you're passionate about, you might want to look and see if the programs you're exploring have some kind of a partnership with industry. So maybe the university has an agreement with ESPN where there's an opportunity to do an internship with that network, for example. Or these could be like research collaborations, just depending what your interests are. But sometimes universities have these special ties that can really help you to see what's special about those programs. Location and climate are ones that seem to be pretty obvious factors here in terms of deciding, where you want to go and the type of environment you want to live in. I personally suggest that you consider, outside the box here, maybe consider going somewhere new, even if it is a different location you might have considered or a different climate than you're perhaps used to, but also understand yourself. So if you know that you really want to be in a big city or you really want to experience a college town, those are things that can help you to narrow down your process. And similarly, size of an institution, size of the student body, the size of the overall campus and the town, those types of things can be important. So these are all some of the kind of key factors to think about when you are making that list of options, when you are making your spreadsheet. and laying out the different opportunities available. I do have a second page of these, and these are somewhat more experiential based. And so what we mean by experiential learning opportunities are things like research, internships, entrepreneurial projects, student competition groups, the types of things where you can gain experience beyond the classroom learning environment. And so if that's the type of experience you're after that you'd really like, that's something you'll want to find out about when you're researching universities of interest. Some of these other things, student services and support, what's the student environment like, what's the housing, what's all those different factors that are going to help you beyond the classroom environment. Certainly the type of student body, so things to think about there. If you're wanting a very diverse student body, perhaps you want to be in a very big international student population or on a campus that has a large Chinese student population. Or perhaps you want to go somewhere that has a very small international student population where you'll just be one of a few and you can really have a different type of experience there. So it's really up to you. There's no right or wrong answer there. And we already kind of talked previously about cost of attendance versus scholarship, but something I want to highlight there is that it is important to consider both things. So sometimes universities have a large, what we call sticker price, so their overall price can be quite high, but sometimes those universities do have scholarships. So kind of assessing what those scholarships may be and what your likelihood is for getting them can kind of help in your narrowing down of options. And one I especially like to highlight is this good fit personality match. And this is another one that's hard sometimes to quantify, but ultimately it's about, how it makes you feel when you connect with this institution, whether or not you can see yourself there, the types of interactions you have with the university, and whether or not they align with what you're looking for. And finally, outcomes or employability. So the types of opportunities students have there after they graduate. Whew, so that was a lot. That was a lot of fit factors there. So I hope you bear with me through that all. But I think I wanted to highlight all of those different elements that you can begin thinking about them for yourself and start to assess which ones are truly important to you in your search process. And once you have kind of started to narrow this down, and really it is a process because you'll start big and progressively work your way through, and you'll start to see which fit factors emerge as being especially important. I think it's important to remember that there are resources to help you along the way. So many of you are fortunate to attend great high schools where you do have wonderful high school career guidance counselors who can help you through this process. So I invite you to, I really encourage you to take advantage of those resources. There's also resources like the universities themselves. So please never be afraid to reach out to the university to ask questions. That can tell you, those types of interactions can really help you to not only learn the information, but also to get a feel for the kind of personality of that institution sometimes. And then of course, there's a lot of online resources you can seek out as well. You can also connect sometimes with alumni or former students who might have attended there. So there are a lot of resources out there. And so I invite you to explore those, to take advantage of the opportunities that are there throughout your search process. So keeping all those things in mind, this should help you to begin to narrow down your options. So you'll start making your list against those factors, use that beautiful spreadsheet that you have to start narrowing in on the ones that really seem like a good fit for you and what you're interested in. And you'll compare that against your own potential and realize that some programs within the university might have even higher requirements than the university itself. So you'll want to keep that in mind as you are narrowing down your options. And as you're doing this, this is where I really encourage you to increase your engagement with the schools, with your shortlisted programs. And so that way you can get a feel for what it is that's going to be a good fit for you. And ultimately decide where to apply and where to go. So it is an exciting time. There's a lot of things to consider, but I promise you it is possible. And I think something that might be helpful to know is that this process of making a decision it follows kind of standard decision-making models. And so I included a couple graphics here just to show you some of the standard process for making a decision. And so, beginning with identifying the overall issue at hand, gathering information, evaluating that information, taking action. These are things that are going to be similar in the process for major decisions you're going to make throughout your life. So yes, this is a big decision. But what I think what's also helpful to know is that this process is going to help you. If you approach it strategically, if you invest the time in it, then hopefully it will pay off in the long run and also help you to develop the skills for making strong decisions in the future. So here are kind of my key advice points for this. One is to plan ahead. If you don't wait till the last minute, then hopefully it'll be a more enjoyable process because you have time to explore. You can enjoy picturing yourself in all these places. You also aren't limiting your options. I again encourage you to keep an open mind, to try to explore new things, explore new places, try to see where it might lead you, because you might end up someplace that you've never even heard of at this point, and that's really exciting. Again, use your resources. Connect. So when I say connect, I mean connect with the universities that interest you, connect with your high school guidance counselors, connect with students at the universities of interest. Just connect. And finally, I encourage you not to stress too much. I know that this is easier said than done. I know it can be a stressful process, but it's one that I hope you will find enjoyment in, and know that there's really not so much a way of making a bad decision. It's more about making the right decision for you. And a graphic that I like to show is this one here. And this shows you, again, kind of down the road, when our students graduate from university. On the left hand of the screen, you'll see the area of study that they were in. And on the right hand, it shows you the industry they went into. So it's a little bit different. It's not quite the university search process, but you'll see that there's a lot of flexibility. So you can go on to be successful in any number of fields from studying any number of majors. And I think the same thing is true for the university search process. You can find success in any number of universities. And the nice thing about the US system is that there does tend to be a lot of flexibility in that process. So if you change your mind, there's often flexibility for that. If you need support, if you change your major, there's a lot of things that are more flexible in the US. So I hope this provides you some comfort that it's not really about making the perfect decision, it's just about making the right decision for you. So with that, I will wrap up the part about finding the right fit, and I would like to introduce my university to you all to see if perhaps it might be a fit for you or one that you'll consider on your list of possibilities. And then I will, of course, leave plenty of time for questions as well. So the university I represent is this beautiful campus you see on your screen here. We're called the University of Missouri, and our nickname is Mizzou. So you'll hear a lot of people, myself included, call it Mizzou a lot of the time because it's our very common nickname. And we were founded in 1839, so we're a fairly old university. We're also the largest university in the state of Missouri. And our institution has about 30,000 students. You'll see here 30,000 tigers because our mascot is Truman, the Bengal tiger. When you come to Mizzou, you become a tiger. And once you're a tiger, you stay a tiger for life. So it's part of your experience. And we do have students from all 50 states and more than 100 countries. So we have a pretty diverse student population. We do have about 300 degree programs from bachelor's through PhD. So we have many students who continue on in their studies. As I mentioned before, we're pretty well known for journalism because we have the oldest school of journalism in the world. It continues to be a great program. But we also have really strong programs in areas such as business, engineering, psychology, arts, different sciences. You'll see a lot of different types of programs, and it's very common at my university for students to study more than one thing. At our institution, we certainly take academics seriously. We are a major research university. And so we're one of only 34 public universities in the Association of American Universities, also known as the AAU. And this is a group of universities in the US and Canada that are dedicated to research and high academic standards. So at our university, we do have great opportunities for research. As you see here, our annual research budget is $205 million. And so there's tons of research going on at all times. We have great faculty, and there's good opportunities for students, even at the undergraduate level, to engage in research. So as you see here, we're even top 10 in the US for undergraduate research, which means that even just starting out in your studies, you can get involved in different projects. And these are not limited to just your traditional sciences. They're across all disciplines at our university. So there's good opportunities for you to not only learn through research, but also to advance the field that you're studying, which is pretty exciting. Learning environment. This is something we touched on earlier in fit factors. So at our university, what I am especially proud of is that I think despite being a fairly large university, about 30,000 students, you might think at a university that large that the classes are going to be huge and you're just a number. But I think what Mizzou does really well is that we are able to still provide a very supportive learning environment. So as you see here, we have an 18-to-1 student to faculty ratio. Our average class size is about 30. And so what's great about that is that students can really still make meaningful connections with their faculty members. And yes, you will have some larger lecture halls, especially in your beginning studies, your more general courses, but even in those large lecture halls, those are often broken down into smaller labs and groups for you to do study sessions. So it's not nearly as overwhelming as it might seem. We are very fortunate to have great faculty from around the world who are really experts in their field. And my advice to you, whether you are interested in Mizzou or elsewhere, is to really connect with those faculty. And I think you'll find that when you show an interest in what that faculty member is teaching, they tend to get excited and they tend to want to engage with you because that's their passion. So for students who take the initiative and want to get involved, want to participate in research, oftentimes faculty members are more than happy to help navigate you, help mentor you in that process. One faculty member at Mizzou that we're especially proud of right now is Dr. Smith. So Dr. George Smith won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2018. And I think what's especially neat about Dr. Smith is he then donated his prize money back to the university to establish a scholarship fund to continue to support undergraduate research. No matter what you study at Mizzou, you will experience the Missouri method. And the Missouri method is something that is our educational philosophy. So talking about learning environment or what it's like to take classes at Mizzou, we really emphasize hands-on learning or learning by doing. So these pictures here are just some examples of the types of classroom environments you can experience, some of the types of activities students engage in. This is everything from the classroom itself to internships to getting involved in research, student competition groups, really lots of different types of ways to engage so that you take what you're learning and apply it in a real world setting. And the picture you see in kind of the middle of the screen, bottom middle, is actually our newsroom. And so what's neat about Mizzou is that we actually have, it's the only one like this in the US, but there's a newsroom, the local media station, KOMU 8. Students run the station under faculty leadership. So students are engaged in broadcasting, they're involved in all different aspects of it. So it's a really great way to gain truly professional experience throughout your studies. And so the School of Journalism was kind of the leader for this on our campus, but it's something that applies to all disciplines and really great ways for you to connect. And of course, at our university, we have lots of services to help you along the way. So we don't only want you to come, but we want you to be successful. We want you to become strong and successful alumni of our institution and to represent us well for life. And so there are great opportunities for you to get help along the way from the time of admission until after you graduate. So some of those are listed here. One I have listed is undergraduate research. So as I mentioned previously, we're quite strong in this area. And so if you have a research idea, you can have the resources to help you get connected with projects and to put in the different proposals that you might need. We also have a great international center to specifically support international students from more of the social, cultural aspects to also the immigration side with your student visa. And not only do we, talk a lot about these types of experiences being important, but we also have the outcomes to demonstrate that. And so after you graduate from your university, you join more than 350,000 alumni around the world. And we have students with a 92% career outcomes rate, which means that they have successfully been placed in either a graduate program or have been employed within 6 months of graduation. We also have more than 5,000 companies recruiting on our campus each year, so there's great ways for you to get connected to industry. And our Career Center does a great job of helping you to develop those skills so that you'll be successful from writing your resume to interviewing to connecting with those employers through internships. And briefly, I'll talk about where we're located. So as I mentioned, we're in the state of Missouri. So if you see that little map of the US there, we are in the middle in that yellow state, which is Missouri. So Missouri is in the middle of the US, and Columbia, the city we're in, is in the middle of Missouri. And so Columbia is the name of the city, but our nickname is Como. So you'll see either one. And Columbia is actually a really great place for university study. It's consistently on lists as being, a top college town in the US. And if you're not familiar, a college town is something where the whole city is really founded around the university. And so it's very supportive of the university environment. There tends to be a lot of art and culture and lots of things to do despite it being a fairly small town. So it's a really nice environment to study and experience kind of a large university. And we do have great facilities for you to live away from home. So we have on-campus housing available. You see here 24 residence halls. All students live on campus their first year. After that, it's optional, but we have many housing options within walking distance of campus. And many students do choose to continue on before their first year. We also have great dining opportunities with a lot of different cuisine available. And I think what's important to know about housing at Mizzou is it's not just about the housing, it's also great support services academically and socially. We also just so happen to have one of the top fitness facilities in the nation on a university campus, so there's great ways for you to kind of find that balance between your studies and your personal life, your wellness. So there's good opportunities there. There's also tons of ways to get involved on campus. You see here more than 600 student clubs and organizations. Athletics are big on our campus too, so there's ways for you to really engage with the experience and to have fun outside of your classroom. We do have a beautiful campus. As a fun fact, our campus is the whole entire campus is a registered national botanical garden. And of course, there's not really a way for me to show that to you here now, but it happens to be one of the top 50 most beautiful campuses in the country, according to Architectural Digest. And so I encourage you to take a virtual tour, which you can do through our website. Very briefly, I just wanted to kind of show you our application process. We do try to keep it fairly straightforward. You apply online, kind of the standard required materials with academic transcripts and English proficiency exam scores. For those of you applying for fall 2020, it is not too late. We do have rolling admissions, and so we are still accepting applications. And for those of you who are in fall 2020, we are being flexible with our English proficiency requirements given the circumstances. For all where with Duolingo is something we are accepting at this time for fall 2020. Beyond that, we're just going to see how the situation goes. Typically, we do require a TOEFL or IELTS, but again, for fall 2020, we are making an exception to that. We are always SAT or ACT optional, so that is not required for admission to Mizzou. They're just required for scholarship consideration. And speaking of scholarships, we do have different awards available. So the two at the bottom you see are automatic awards that are based on SAT scores. So with those scores, you automatically qualify for either of these awards with your application for admission. The top scholarship you see listed is the Stamps Award, and this does require additional materials. It is highly competitive, but it's also a full award. So this goes to just a handful of students in our applicant pool each year. And the final thing I wanted to highlight is our international student ambassadors, because I think this is probably my biggest advice to you tonight is to really try, and it's a way to connect with the campus, is to see if you can connect with current students there. Because certainly I'm happy to answer questions, but I think there's just something about connecting with a student that's really meaningful. And so we're fortunate to have wonderful international student ambassadors representing different countries and different academic programs, and they're more than happy to answer questions you might have about what it's really like to study on our campus. We happen to have two wonderful international ambassadors from China, And so representing, as you see here, a couple different areas of study. And so if you want to connect with either of them, again, through our website, you can do so. You can reach out to me. We also do have a WeChat page. So they're really wonderful resources. So I encourage you to take advantage of that and ask questions that you might have. And so finally, I wanted to put this page back up here again, where I have my contact information as well as the QR code for our WeChat page. So I do appreciate your time and attention. I know I went through a lot of information there. And so I am going to wrap it up here and turn it over for questions. But please, once again, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you do have any questions after this recording is over.
Shannon, thank you so much. It was really great and valuable information, and really looking at the different graphics that you prepared for our students and parents on to really think about, how is it to find the right fit, whether it be learning style or, career options going forward. So I'm going to ask a few questions that have been posed by the audience, and then
Sure.
Just remember, everyone, if you have more questions, you can please, you can use the chat box and just send them over to me, and I will ask. And then if you would like to ask a question via audioly after I finish all my questions, I'll give you a chance to do that as well. So I'll just start with one of the questions. We had a question from a student that said, what are the competitive IB scores for business or international relations at Missouri?
Yeah, good question. So IB is each university will handle that a little bit differently. In the US, I would say we especially handle that a little bit differently as a general rule than the UK. So at my university in particular, we will look at your IB scores in the sense that, so we'll look at everything. So sometimes students just want to know, like, what final test score do I need in order to be admitted? And I know that's especially important with more of the British system. For us, we're going to look at all of the coursework that you've done throughout high school and the grades that you have earned in all of those courses. And so we'll use that to determine your admission. And so based on that, if you use the IB curriculum throughout, for us, we're looking at about a 5 average, and that would be a strong overall average for you to be admitted to our university. And our business program does not have, at our university does not have higher requirements than our standard admission. And so in that case, if you had a 5 average, you would meet the grade requirements. Now, I think what is maybe helpful to know is that after you take your IB exam and have those final IB results, that those results would then make you eligible for university transfer credit. And so if you score, for most courses, it's usually about around a 5, sometimes a 6. We have a whole list on our website, so you can know exactly what you need to get. But if you score well on those exams, then you can see exactly the type of course that will transfer into at the university. And so what that means is that essentially you will get credit for that course, so you won't have to take it again once you come.
Great, thank you. The next question is about your honors college. Is there a deadline for your honors college?
Good question. So we have a great honors college at our university. We're very fortunate to have. Now, our honors college, so there's kind of 2 ways to answer this question. The initial deadline for honors college that students want to be aware of, if you're not already in your senior year, is that typically they want you to apply around November 15th, final deadline being December 1, if you want to be considered for that STAMP scholarship I mentioned. And so your application to honors, you have to be admitted to honors in order to be eligible for stamps. So a lot of students will apply by that deadline. However, if you miss that deadline, you can still apply up until March. And so it just kind of depends on whether or not you're wanting to be considered for that highly competitive scholarship. So again, that's final deadline December 1 if you want to be considered for honors and the STAMP scholarship. If you're not worried about STAMP scholarship, you have until March.
We have another question, I think, not only from Missouri, but going back to finding the right fit. One of our attendees wanted to know, how can a student have a better idea of what the learning and the teaching program is like at a university without necessarily visiting campus?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think that kind of comes down to, sort of that learning environment. And so I think there's a few things there. One, it will vary a little bit even within the same university, especially if you're looking at, say, a large comprehensive research university like Mizzou or another large state university, where even within that university, you'll find different styles of instruction depending on what you study or what level you're into. So for example, you might take some large lecture halls for more of your general education courses, and then those might transition into more lab and very small type of courses as you progress in your studies. But overall, I think you can get a feel for that type of experience by looking at certain metrics like average class size, like student to faculty ratio. And I also think this is where the best advice I can give is to try to connect with that university, and especially if there's ways to connect with current students. I know this is one of the most common questions that our international student ambassadors get asked. And since they do represent different academic disciplines, I think they're very good about explaining kind of what their typical day and what their typical week looks like, their typical semester, so that they can kind of give you a feel for what it's really like to take classes, what that learning environment is, what that relationship with that faculty member is. So those are, a few things to consider. I would say you can also get a little bit of a feel for that just based on sometimes as simple as looking at videos from the university, just asking questions about, what that learning environment might look like. Because you will find some variation from different institutional types, like small liberal arts college, for example, might have a little bit of a different experience than a large university.
Great, thank you. Another question is, I think looking at how can a student start to find the right major? And I guess if you can answer that from the perspective of how Missouri will help a student find that right major of study, to also how in general students can go about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's another one that can definitely feel like a big decision, and one I certainly understand. Something I wanted to kind of start with is saying the good news there is that it's very common for students to change their mind. And so that can hopefully show you that there is some flexibility in the process. Now, as far as kind of how to decide, I would say a great thing is that at my university, at many universities, there's great support services. So you work with someone called an academic advisor, and they help you to take different types of courses to kind of help you in that decision process. There's also resources in the case of my university through like our career center, where you can do different assessments, you can do different types of experiences, perhaps job shadow, where you can actually go to a different work environment, see what a particular profession is like, and gain experiences so you can kind of get a feel for whether or not that's something that's of interest to you. So it's kind of similar to that overall decision process model that I showed, where you can kind of start with, what is it I want to do, and then gather that information to help narrow down on your choices. But I think what's really important to know is that you have really great support along the way. So you have people who are professionals who are really guiding you in that. It might be helpful to know that some universities do need you to at least pick a major at the time of admission, so that they can know, which program to admit you into. A lot of times, though, there is flexibility, and that's something that you can certainly ask in the admissions process is, if I am undecided, how does that work at your university? Would that be a problem if I change majors? Sometimes there are specific requirements where you essentially kind of have to apply to a particular program if it has different requirements, the one you're admitted to, so something to be aware of. But again, these are questions you can ask in the admissions process, and just know that you do have support. You do have people who guide you through that to help you gain different experiences to narrow down and ultimately decide what you want to major in. And the final thing I want to say there is that oftentimes in kind of the overall university model, and again, this will vary a little bit from university to university, but most commonly, a lot of students have flexibility to kind of make that decision or change their mind within their first couple of years of study, because that's when you're taking the most general education coursework. And so you do have that flexibility within those 2 years. And then once you go beyond those 2 years, oftentimes you're in more specialized courses. So it's not that you can't change after that point, it's that it might extend your overall program of study because you need to take the classes to prepare you for those upper level coursework.
Great. This question is a little bit more specific to schools like YCIS, and it has to do with the English language requirement. So if our students let's say, foreign passport holders, and they have taken English A in their IGCSE, for example, and English A also in their IB, as the school is a complete English environment, will they still have to take the IELTS and TOEFL requirement, or will that be able to be waived by the university?
Yeah, that's a good question. So specifically, well, let me just say overall, it will vary from university to university. Here at Mizzou, in those situations, we do kind of evaluate case by case and look to see, if the student has been in that curriculum throughout high school. If IGCSE specifically, we do accept it as an alternative to TOEFL or IELTS. We also do accept IB English as an alternative to TOEFL or IELTS. However, the challenge with IB being that the results for that are often not available until after a student is essentially admitted. So many times students will go ahead and submit TOEFL or IELTS so that there isn't that delay. But with IGCSE, we are often able to accept those.
Great, thank you so much.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
sure.
absolutely does. Absolutely does. Any other questions from the audience? If you'd like to verbally ask questions to Shannon. You can just simply unmute yourself and just feel free to ask the question. Okay, Shannon, thank you so much for sharing this great session with us about really how to help students and their families find the right fit in the US. As you shared in the very beginning, it's a big country with a lot of schools. So thank you for giving us frameworks and strategies and models for students and parents to really start to think this through. And thank you also so much for sharing so much great insight about the University of Missouri. I have definitely learned a lot myself about the fantastic program, and it has helped me as a counselor to really help my students to see if University of Missouri is the right fit. And then, so on behalf of everyone here, I would just like to say thank you. It was very, very valuable. Thank you for taking the time, so late for you, to really share with us and really care for our students and our families here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And just once again, thank you all, and feel free to reach out to me if you do have additional questions.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and stay safe and healthy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.